They called it the Anomaly, at first a doctor. Amara Rodriguez stared at the data, scrolling across her monitor, the blue light reflecting off her glasses in the dimly lit operations center of Helix Aerospace. Her fingers trembled slightly as she zoomed in on the section of the ground-penetrating radar scan that had triggered every alarm in the system. "That can't be right," she muttered, running the calibration diagnostic for the third time. The subterranean mapping probe they'd sent down had been functioning perfectly for weeks, methodically scanning beneath the Martian South Pole, where their base camp had been established. But this was impossible. She picked up her comm unit. "Director Walsh, you need to see this. Now." 15 minutes later, the operations center was packed with the senior staff of Expedition Ares, Helix Aerospace's ambitious Mars mission. Unlike the government-funded expeditions that had preceded them, Helix had committed to a long-term presence on the Red Planet, a permanent research station with the eventual goal of limited colonization. Marcus Walsh, the expedition director, leaned over Rodriguez's workstation, his weathered face creased in concentration. At 62, he was considered too old for a Mars mission by NASA standards, but Helix had different priorities. They wanted his 40 years of geological expertise, not his ability to withstand G-forces. "Walk me through it again," he said, his voice low and controlled despite the tension in the room. Rodriguez nodded. The GPR was mapping Sector 7B, about 12 kilometers from base, when it detected this massive void starting at approximately 215 meters below the surface. She pointed to the screen. "Initially, I thought it was an instrumental error, but 3 recalibrations showed the same result. It's a cavity, sir. A massive one, at least 50 kilometers across from what we can tell so far." "A lava tube?" suggested Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka, their exogeologist. Rodriguez shook her head. "Too large, too deep, and the wrong region for volcanic activity. And look at this." She pulled up another scan. "The radar is showing high-density reflections consistent with liquid water. A lot of it." The room fell silent. "That's not possible," said Dr. Li Wei, the mission's senior physicist. "The pressure at that depth would still be too low for liquid water without a containment structure of some kind," finished Rodriguez, her voice barely above a whisper. "Look at the regularity of these formations along the boundaries." She highlighted a series of evenly spaced structures on the scan. Walsh straightened, his expression unreadable. "Are you suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything yet," Rodriguez said carefully. "Just reporting what the instruments are showing us. But whatever this is, it's not a natural formation. At least, not entirely." In the silence that followed, Rodriguez could hear the constant, subtle hum of the life support systems that kept them alive on this hostile world. 6 months into their mission, the 18 members of Expedition Ares had already made significant discoveries, evidence of ancient water flows, complex organic compounds, and geological features that would keep Earth scientists busy for decades. But this would change everything. Walsh was the first to speak. "We need to confirm this before we tell Earth. No one breathes a word of this until we know exactly what we're dealing with." He turned to the mission's chief engineer. "Alexei, how quickly can we get a specialized probe down there?" Alexei Kuznetsov, a former Russian cosmonaut with a genius for mechanical improvisation, considered the question. "The mining drill was designed to reach depths of 300 meters. We can modify it to create a shaft large enough for a submersible probe. 3 days, maybe 4. "Make it 2, said Walsh. "And I want complete isolation protocols. If there's water down there, we can't risk contamination in either direction." As the team dispersed to begin preparations, Rodriguez remained at her station, staring at the scan. Something about the configuration of those structures nagged at her. They seemed almost architectural. "Weren't you telling me?" Walsh asked quietly, once they were alone. Rodriguez zoomed in on one section of the scan. "There's something else in the data. Thermal signatures, electromagnetic anomalies. Whatever's down there, I don't think it's been dormant for all that long." Walsh's expression darkened. "Keep digging. I want to know everything before we break ground." "Yes, sir." She hesitated. "If this is what I think it is, then we've just made the most important discovery in human history," Walsh finished. "And we need to get it right." After Walsh left, Rodriguez sent a carefully worded message to Earth, requesting specialized analysis of the GPR data without revealing its significance. The 20-minute communication delay had never felt so frustrating. Outside the habitat's reinforced windows, a Martian dust storm was beginning to swirl, casting an eerie reddish glow over the landscape. Rodriguez found herself wondering what else might be hidden beneath the planet's rust-colored surface, and whether humanity was ready to find out. 2 days later, the modified drilling platform stood ready at the designated site, a hulking silhouette against the stark Martian horizon. The dust storm had intensified, reducing visibility and forcing the team to rely heavily on instruments rather than visual confirmation. Dr. Jamal Williams, the mission's robotic specialist, made a final adjustment to the submersible probe they nicknamed Nessie. Originally designed to explore suspected water ice deposits, the probe had been hastily retrofitted with additional sensors, cameras, and sampling equipment. "She's as ready as she'll ever be," Williams told Walsh through the comm system in their pressure suits. "But I'm still not convinced the tether will hold at that depth." "The pressure differential alone could," noted, Walsh interrupted. "But we're proceeding. The backup protocols are in place if we lose connection." Rodriguez monitored the drilling operation from the mobile command unit they'd established at the site. Hour after hour, the massive drill bore through the Martian regolith, sending vibrations through the ground that could be felt even through their suits. Spectral analysis of the ejected material showed increasing moisture content the deeper they went, confirming at least part of their theory. At the 180-meter mark, something changed. The drill's progress suddenly accelerated, as if it had broken through into a less dense layer. Sensors showed a dramatic drop in resistance. "We've hit something," announced Kuznetsov, his eyes fixed on the drilling telemetry. "Some kind of shell or barrier. Not natural rock." "Pull back 5 meters, ordered Walsh. "Let's send down a camera before we proceed." The preliminary images sent the command unit into stunned silence. The drill had penetrated what appeared to be an artificial ceiling of some kind, a massive structure composed of an unknown, reflective material that was distinctly not natural. "My God," whispered Dr. Elizabeth Norton, the team's astrobiologist. "Constructed. Actually constructed." Walsh remained outwardly calm, though Rodriguez could see the tension in his posture. "Proceed with extreme caution. Widen the bore to accommodate Nessie, but minimal disruption to whatever that structure is." 6 hours later, they were ready for the probe's descent. Williams sat at the control station, his fingers dancing over the interface as he guided Nessie down the narrow shaft. The team watched on multiple screens as the probe's lights illuminated the dark passage. When Nessie reached the breakthrough point, the camera feed showed what they'd all been both hoping and fearing to see: a vast, open space beyond the artificial barrier. The probe's powerful lights couldn't reach the distant boundaries, giving the impression of an infinite darkness. "Deploying sonar," Williams announced, his voice tight with concentration. The results sent a collective gasp through the command unit. The void was indeed filled with liquid, billions of gallons of water, extending for kilometers in every direction. "Temperature reading is 4.3 degrees Celsius, reported Norton, her voice trembling with excitement. "Pressure is consistent with a controlled environment. This isn't a natural cave system. It's engineered." "Taking samples," Williams said, activating the probe's collection system. Nessie descended into the dark water. Its lights revealed glimpses of the massive chamber. Enormous support structures rose from unseen depths, disappearing into the darkness above. The walls were covered in geometric patterns that couldn't possibly have formed naturally. And then, as the probe ventured deeper, they saw them. "Are those buildings?" gasped Norton. Rising from the submerged floor were unmistakable structures: towers, domes, and angular constructions arranged in patterns suggesting a city. A dead, submerged city with no signs of current habitation, but a city nonetheless. "We need to send these images to Earth immediately," Walsh said, his professional demeanor finally cracking to reveal raw amazement. "Wait," Rodriguez interrupted, pointing to one of the secondary screens. "Nessie's picking up something else. Some kind of movement." Williams adjusted the probe's trajectory, directing it toward the source of the disturbance. As they watched in breathless anticipation, the lights illuminated a swirling cluster of what appeared to be small, bioluminescent organisms, each no larger than a human finger. but moving with clear purpose and coordination. They're reacting to our presence, Norton whispered. Those are living organisms. Complex multicellular life. On Mars, the creatures, if that's what they were, began to arrange themselves in a spherical formation around the probe, their blue-green light pulsing in what seemed almost like a synchronized pattern. Are they communicating? Asked Li Wei. Before anyone could answer, the probe's sensors detected a low-frequency vibration emanating from the cluster. The pattern was regular, repeating, unmistakably deliberate. They're not just alive, Rodriguez said softly. They're intelligent. In that moment, huddled in a small command unit on the frozen surface of Mars, the 18 members of Expedition Ares confronted a truth that would forever change humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. We are not alone. We have never been alone. News of the discovery sparked a global frenzy back on Earth. Life on Mars confirmed screamed headlines across every platform. Stock in Helix Aerospace soared to unprecedented heights, while religious leaders, politicians, and scientists scrambled to interpret the significance of finding complex aquatic life hidden beneath the Martian surface. But in the 2 weeks since the initial breakthrough, the team on Mars had made an even more startling discovery, one they had not yet shared with Earth. Rodriguez stood before the assembled expedition members in the main habitat's conference room. The atmosphere was tense. No one had been sleeping well since they'd begun to decipher the patterns. It's language, she said simply, displaying a series of waveform analyses on the main screen. The vibrations the organisms emit, they're not random. They follow syntactical rules, recursion patterns, all the hallmarks of true language. That's impossible, Dr. Tanaka objected. These are simple aquatic organisms, not simple. Rodriguez interrupted, bringing up new footage from Nessie's latest exploration. Look at this. The video showed hundreds of the bioluminescent creatures working in concert to manipulate objects in the submerged city, moving debris, accessing what appeared to be mechanical systems, even using primitive tools. They're maintaining the structure, she explained. The entire underground ocean is artificially sustained by ancient technology, and these organisms are keeping it functional. They've been doing it for, we don't know how long, possibly millions of years. Walsh leaned forward, his expression grave. What are you suggesting, Amara? Rodriguez took a deep breath. I believe these aren't the original inhabitants of this underground world. They are caretakers, left behind to maintain the system after the builders were gone. She switched to another display showing structural analysis of the submerged city. The architecture suggests the original inhabitants were much larger, possibly humanoid in basic body plan. But the environmental systems, the water purification, the pressure regulators, even the artificial gravity field we've detected, they're all designed to be maintained by small, aquatic organisms. Like a garden, murmured Norton. They left behind gardeners to tend their world after they departed, or died out, added Williams soberly. Rodriguez nodded. Either way, these creatures are intelligent, social, and performing complex tasks. They've been isolated for so long, they've evolved into something unique, neither fully artificial nor fully natural. And they're trying to communicate with us. The implications hung heavily in the air. If Rodriguez was right, they weren't just dealing with alien life. They were dealing with the remnants of an ancient technological civilization that had once called Mars home. There's something else, Rodriguez continued after a moment. The patterns the creatures form around our probe, they're not just communication attempts. They're matching configurations we've found in the architectural details throughout the city. Almost like they're showing us they recognize the symbols. As if they're saying, "We know what this means, do you?" suggested Dr. Norton. Walsh rose from his seat, pacing the length of the conference room. The public relations team at Helix is pushing for more information. Earth is going crazy with speculation, and the major space agencies are scrambling to send their own missions. We need to decide how much to reveal. We should tell them everything, Williams argued. This belongs to all of humanity. Does it? Countered Kuznetsov. These creatures have survived undisturbed for who knows how long. The moment we announce intelligent life, this place will be swarming with every government and corporation on Earth, all fighting for access. The debate continued for hours, growing increasingly heated as the team grappled with the ethical implications of their discovery. By the time they adjourned, only one thing was clear. They needed more information before making any irreversible decisions. That night, unable to sleep, Rodriguez returned to the communications center. She sat alone in the dim light, reviewing the latest footage from Nessie's explorations. The creatures had begun to form increasingly complex patterns in response to the probe's presence. As if escalating their attempts at communication, on impulse, she activated the probe's acoustic transmitter and sent a simple pattern. The first 6 prime numbers, a mathematical sequence that many theorists had suggested might serve as a universal language. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the creatures arranged themselves in a pattern that unmistakably mirrored what she had sent, but with an addition. They had appended the next prime number in the sequence. They understood, she whispered to herself, a chill running down her spine. She sent another sequence, slightly more complex. Again, they responded correctly, adding their own extension to the pattern. Heart pounding, Rodriguez began documenting the exchange. Over the next several hours, the communication progressed from simple mathematical sequences to basic symbolic representations. The creatures proved not only capable of understanding, but of extrapolating and innovating. Hallmarks of true intelligence, by dawn, she was convinced. They were communicating with the last survivors of Mars's ancient civilization, or rather, with their designated inheritors. When she finally presented her findings to the rest of the team, the mood shifted from skepticism to awe. Even Walsh, ever the pragmatist, could not deny the implications. "We need to proceed with extreme caution," he said after reviewing her data. "These creatures trusted us enough to respond. We have a responsibility to protect them and learn from them," added Norton. "Imagine what they could tell us about Mars's past, about the civilization that built all this." The decision was made. They would report the existence of life to Earth, but withhold the evidence of intelligence and communication until they had established more robust protections for the underwater ecosystem and its inhabitants. Yes, they prepared their carefully worded announcement. Rodriguez found herself returning again and again to the video feeds from the submerged city. There was something hauntingly familiar about the architectural patterns, the technological systems, as if they had been designed by minds that thought not so differently from human ones. Convergent evolution, Norton suggested when Rodriguez mentioned this observation. Similar problems often lead to similar solutions, even across different worlds. But Rodriguez wasn't convinced. There was something else nagging at her, a theory so outlandish she hesitated to voice it even to herself. But as they decoded more of the creature's communications, translating symbolic patterns into concepts, the evidence became harder to ignore. The ancient Martians hadn't simply died out or departed, at least not entirely. When faced with their planet's cooling core and thinning atmosphere, they had done something extraordinary, something that spoke to an intelligence both pragmatic and profound. They had engineered their own evolution, creating the aquatic organisms as not just caretakers but inheritors, vessels for preserving aspects of their consciousness, their knowledge, their cultured IT was an inheritance model. A way of ensuring that even as their original forms ceased to exist, something of them would endure. And now, millions of years later, humanity had arrived, another intelligent species with the capacity to understand what they had achieved. The question was, were they ready for what the Martians had left behind? 3 months after the initial discovery, expeditionaries had been transformed. What had begun as a research outpost was now the focal point of humanity's first sustained contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. But a second, larger shaft had been carefully drilled into the underground ocean, allowing for the deployment of more sophisticated monitoring equipment and a specially designed habitation module that could be lowered to the edge of the water. From this subterranean outpost, scientists could observe the aquatic organisms, now officially termed custodians in all reports, without the limitations of remote operation. Rodriguez had become the de facto communication specialist, spending most of her waking hours in the subterranean module, developing increasingly sophisticated methods of information exchange with the custodians. What had begun with mathematical sequences had evolved into a complex symbolic language that allowed for the transmission of basic concepts. "They're showing us another section of the city today," she told Walsh during their weekly briefing. "Something they seem particularly eager for us to see." Walsh nodded, studying the latest 3-dimensional map they'd constructed of the underwater metropolis. "Any progress on accessing the central structure?" Not yet. The Custodians are protective of it, but they've been gradually leading us closer. This central structure was a massive, dome-shaped building situated at the heart of the submerged city. Unlike the other structures, which showed signs of age and deterioration, this one appeared almost pristine, maintained with particular care by the Custodians. Its purpose remained a mystery, but its importance was obvious from the reverence the creatures showed toward it. "I still don't like how much we're keeping from Earth," Walsh said after a moment. "The pressure from Helix executives is getting worse. They want marketable discoveries, technologies they can patent." Rodriguez frowned. "We've already sent back enough scientific data to keep researchers busy for decades. The material analysis alone from the support structures has revolutionized our understanding of molecular engineering. That's not enough for them. They invested billions in this mission. They want something tangible, something they can sell. These creatures aren't a product," Rodriguez said sharply, "and neither is their home." Walsh raised his hands in a placating gesture. "I agree with you, but we need to give the board something, or they might order us to take more direct measures." The implications hung heavily between them. Helix Aerospace was a private company, not bound by the same ethical guidelines that govern governmental space agencies. While the expedition team was committed to protection and study, the corporate executives back on Earth were motivated by different priorities. "Give me more time," Rodriguez said finally. "The Custodians are becoming more trusting. I think they're preparing to show us something significant." Later that day, Rodriguez descended once more to the submerged module. Through the reinforced viewport, she could see dozens of Custodians gathered, their bioluminescence creating patterns of light that danced across the dark water. Using the symbolic interface she developed, a system of light pulses and geometric shapes projected onto the water, she greeted them and expressed readiness for the day's exploration. The response came quickly, a complex pattern indicating movement, discovery, and what Rodriguez had tentatively translated as origin or beginning. The Custodians led Nessie deeper into the city than they'd previously allowed, toward an area they hadn't explored before. As the probe's lights illuminated the new territory, Rodriguez gasped. The buildings here were different, smaller, more intricate, clearly designed for inhabitants closer in size to the Custodians themselves. And unlike the larger structures, these showed signs of current use and habitation. They live here, she realized, watching as Custodians moved in and out of the structures with purpose. This isn't just a maintenance area, it's their community. The Custodians guided the probe through what appeared to be a network of tunnels and chambers, each filled with evidence of a complex society. Areas clearly dedicated to different functions, objects that resembled tools or artifacts, even what looked like artistic installations, arrangements of collected materials that served no obvious practical purpose. And then they arrived at a central chamber, larger than the others, where hundreds of Custodians had gathered in concentric circles around a raised platform. On the platform sat an object unlike anything Rodriguez had seen in the city before. A crystalline structure approximately 1 meter tall, emitting a faint, pulsing light from within. The Custodians formed a pattern that Rodriguez now recognized as their symbol for communication, followed by a new configuration she hadn't seen before. She tried various interpretations through the interface, attempting to understand what they were showing her. After several attempts, a pattern emerged in their responses that suggested a concept she could only translate as memory, or perhaps knowledge. "It's some kind of data storage," she murmured into her recorder. "They're showing us their library? Archifo." She directed Nessie closer to the crystalline object. As the probe approached, the light within the crystal intensified, pulsing in a pattern that matched the bioluminescence of the surrounding Custodians. Suddenly, Nessie's sensors detected an electromagnetic pulse emanating from the crystal, a structured data transmission on a frequency the probe's systems could barely detect, let alone decode. "They're trying to send us information," Rodriguez realized. She quickly adjusted Nessie's receivers to better capture the signal, transferring the raw data back to the base's main computers for analysis. Hours later, huddled with the expedition's top scientists in the main laboratory, Rodriguez watched as their systems began to decode the transmission. "It's massive," reported Williams, staring at the data stream. "Terabytes of information, highly structured. This isn't random. It's a deliberate data package. As the first decoded segments appeared on their screens, the room fell silent. They were looking at schematics, incredibly detailed technical diagrams of what appeared to be the environmental systems that maintain the underground ocean. "They're showing us how it all works," breathed Norton. "The water purification, the pressure regulation, the artificial gravity, everything." But that was just the beginning. As more of the data package was decoded, they found historical records, a visual chronicle that appeared to document the evolution of Mars from a planet not unlike ancient Earth to the frozen desert it was now. And then came the most astonishing revelation of all: detailed genetic sequences, alongside what could only be described as an engineering manual for biological systems. "This is how they were made," Rodriguez said softly, understanding dawning as she studied the information. The original Martians, they documented the entire process of creating the Custodians. The data told a story more extraordinary than any they could have imagined. Facing extinction as their planet's climate failed, the original inhabitants of Mars had embarked on a two-pronged survival strategy. Some had left the planet entirely, though for where, the records didn't specify. Others had chosen a different path, creating the underground ocean as a protected environment and engineering the Custodians not just as caretakers, but as living repositories of their knowledge and culture. The Custodians were more than just intelligent alien life. They were the deliberate inheritors of a dying civilization, designed to preserve what would otherwise have been lost forever. And now, they were sharing that inheritance with humanity. They've been waiting, Rodriguez realized. All this time, maintaining the systems, preserving the knowledge. They've been waiting for someone else to find them. To understand, in the days that followed, more of the data package was decoded, revealing technologies and scientific insights far beyond current human capabilities. Methods for atmospheric generation, efficient energy production without fossil fuels, medical innovations including cellular regeneration techniques. The question of what to share with Earth became more complex than ever. These discoveries could transform human civilization, potentially solving the climate crisis, energy shortages, even disease and aging. But they also represented power that, in the wrong hands, could be misused or monopolized. After much debate, the expedition team made a decision that would ultimately put them at odds with their corporate sponsors. They would transmit all of the Custodian data to multiple scientific institutions simultaneously, ensuring no single entity, not even Helix Aerospace, claim exclusive control. "We'll probably all lose our jobs," Walsh remarked dryly as they prepared the transmission. Rodriguez smiled. "Worth it." The data transmission to Earth would take several hours to complete. As they waited, Rodriguez returned once more to the underwater viewing module. Wanting to thank the Custodians for what they had shared to her surprise, they had gathered in unprecedented numbers, forming patterns more complex than any she had seen before. Through the symbolic interface, they conveyed a message that took her breath away. Not end, beginning. They were showing her something new, a sequence of genetic information alongside what appeared to be human DNA. The patterns suggested integration, combination, synthesis. The implications were staggering. The Custodians weren't just sharing their creator's knowledge. They were proposing a path forward together, a joining of Martian and Earth life, of technologies and cultures, of evolutionary paths that had diverged billions of years ago only to reconverge in this moment. As Rodriguez contemplated this extraordinary proposal, she realized that the discovery of life on Mars wasn't just about finding evidence of a past alien civilization. It was about the future, a future where humanity might not be alone in facing the challenges of survival in an unforgiving universe. The Custodians have preserved their creator's legacy through millions of years of isolation. In doing so, they had demonstrated a resilience and commitment that rivaled humanity's own stubborn determination to explore, to understand, to endure. Perhaps that was the most profound revelation of all. That intelligence, wherever it evolved, shared certain fundamental qualities: curiosity, adaptability, and an unwillingness to surrender to extinction. As the data transmission to Earth completed, Rodriguez sent one final message through the symbolic interface. "We understand. Together." The response came quickly, a symmetrical pattern of light that needed no translation. "Hope." The revelation of the Martian inheritance forever altered humanity's path. In the 5 years following Expedition Ares' discovery, Earth underwent transformations that previous generations could scarcely have imagined. The technologies gleaned from the Custodians' data vault, particularly in the fields of environmental engineering, medicine, and energy production, accelerated human development by what experts estimated as a century or more. The most immediate impact came in addressing climate change. Atmospheric processing systems based on Martian designs were deployed globally, beginning the long process of reducing carbon levels and stabilizing Earth's weather patterns. New energy production methods made fossil fuels obsolete almost overnight, rendering decades-old geopolitical conflicts suddenly irrelevant. Medical breakthroughs led to treatments for previously incurable diseases and extended human lifespans. Genetic engineering, guided by the sophisticated biological understanding of the ancient Martians, opened possibilities that rewrote the boundaries of human potential. But these technological advances were only part of the story. The psychological and spiritual impact of confirming intelligent alien life and learning of its deliberate choice to preserve knowledge for future civilizations prompted a fundamental reevaluation of humanity's place in the cosmos. Religious institutions incorporated the Martian narrative into their theologies. Educational systems were overhauled to emphasize the interconnectedness of all life. International cooperation reached unprecedented levels as nations united around the shared project of establishing sustained communication with the Custodians. And at the center of it all was Amara Rodriguez, who had become the primary liaison between humanity and the ancient inheritors of Mars, standing in the expanded underwater viewing chamber, now a permanent installation at the edge of the Martian subterranean ocean. Rodriguez watched as a group of Custodians demonstrated a complex molecular assembly process to a team of visiting scientists. "Still hard to believe sometimes, isn't it?" said a familiar voice behind her. She turned to find Marcus Walsh, his hair now completely gray but his eyes as sharp as ever. After the expedition's decision to share the Custodian data globally, Helix Aerospace had initially threatened legal action against the team. But faced with overwhelming public support for open access to the discoveries, the company had eventually relented, rebranding itself as a facilitator of human-Martian cooperation rather than an owner of alien technology. Walsh had retired from active leadership, but remained a key advisor to the now international Mars initiative. Every day, Rodriguez agreed, turning back to watch the Custodians, though they still managed to surprise me regularly. The most recent surprise had been the Custodians' revelation of ancient Martian outposts elsewhere in the solar system. Automated bases established on distant moons and asteroids before their civilizations' decline. Preliminary expeditions to Europa and Ceres had confirmed these claims, uncovering dormant facilities that were now being carefully studied. The genetic integration project is proceeding faster than expected, Walsh mentioned, referring to the collaborative effort that had emerged from the Custodians' proposal. The first viable hybrid proteins were synthesized last week. The project, which combined elements of Martian and Earth biology to create new organisms specialized for terraforming purposes, represented the most ambitious collaboration yet between the two worlds. If successful, it would accelerate the long-term goal of restoring Mars's surface environment, potentially making the planet habitable again within a few centuries rather than the originally estimated millennia. "They're impatient," Rodriguez said with a smile, watching the Custodians' energetic movements. After waiting millions of years for contact, a few more centuries for terraforming seems unreasonable to them. "Can't blame them for that," Walsh chuckled. "Humanity isn't exactly known for patience either. That shared impatience, the drive to reshape environments, to overcome limitations, to constantly evolve, had proven to be one of the most significant commonalities between the ancient Martians and humans. The Custodians have been engineered with that same essential quality, making them eager partners in the rebuilding of their world." A soft, alert tone sounded from Rodriguez's communication device. "The neural interface test is starting," she said, checking the message. "We should head up." The neural interface was the latest breakthrough, a direct communication system between human minds and the Custodians' unique consciousness. Early tests had shown promising results, allowing for the transmission of complex concepts that defied traditional language, Yes, they rode the elevator up through the shaft connecting the underwater chamber to the surface facilities. Walsh asked the question that had been on many minds lately. Do you think they'll ever find them? Rodriguez knew immediately what he meant. Among the data the Custodians had shared was evidence that some portion of the original Martian population had departed the solar system entirely as their planet failed, heading toward distant stars and vessels designed for multi-generational travel. I hope so, she said after a moment's consideration, though they'd hardly recognize their descendants now, or what's become of their homeworld. The expanded Mars base spread out before them as they emerged from the elevator. A sprawling complex of research facilities, habitation modules, and the first experimental surface terraforming stations. Nearly 300 people now lived and worked on Mars permanently, with regular transport ships bringing new personnel and returning others to Earth.in orbit. The construction of larger vessels was underway, ships designed using Martian propulsion technology that would soon make travel to the outer solar system a matter of weeks rather than years. There was even talk of attempting to follow the ancient Martians' interstellar path. Though such missions remained theoretical for now, as they entered the Neural Interface Laboratory, Rodriguez reflected on the extraordinary journey that had led to this moment. What had begun as a private company's quest for profit and prestige had evolved into something far more profound. The reunification of two evolutionary branches that had diverged billions of years ago, when life from early Mars had possibly seeded Earth through meteorite impacts. The ancient Martians, facing extinction, had created the Custodians to preserve their legacy. In doing so, they had ensured that when their distant cousins, humans, finally reached Mars, they would find not just evidence of past life, but active, intelligent beings ready to share the accumulated wisdom of millions of years. That IT was a gift across time and space, from one intelligent species to another. A testament to the power of knowledge and the universal drive to ensure that something of one civilization endured beyond its natural lifespan. The neural interface activated, establishing the most direct connection yet between human and Custodian minds. Rodriguez felt a profound sense of homecoming, as if two parts of a long-separated whole were finally reconnecting. In that moment of neural synchronization, a thought form that seemed to originate from both her consciousness and that of the Custodian simultaneously. We are different branches of the same ancient tree, and together, we will reach for the stars once more. The inheritance of Mars had been claimed, and humanity would never be the same again.